So now you have a chance to choose candidate A, B, C, or D. Stop the video and choose now. So did you pick candidate A? This person, his goal is to create an agricultural utopia. It will require him to get rid of all those who might oppose his plans. He's going to start by getting rid of all the Buddhist monks, the Western educated intellectuals, the people who appear to be intelligent, for example, any individuals with glasses, the crippled, the lame, and the ethnic minorities. People who live in cities are like parasites that prey on those who live in the countryside, so he shall destroy all cities and move anyone who lives there to the countryside. They shall provide the labor that will build the agricultural utopia, and if they survive, no gain, but if they die, there's no loss. If they resist, you have to kill them, and you have to save bullets, so anyone who resists his plan will be ordered to dig their own graves. He's going to then beat them to death or bury them alive. All religions are to be abolished, and minorities are forbidden to speak their own language or practice their own customs. He almost achieved his dream in Cambodia during the late 1970s, when his followers killed approximately 2.3 million people out of a population of 8 million. His name is Pol Pot. Thank you for not being informed and for casting your vote for him. Did you vote for candidate B? This person is Idi Amin. He's from Uganda, and he's a former soldier for the British Empire in Africa. He's very brave and charismatic, and he received a high rank in the army. He's also a former professional swimmer and a champion boxer, and a lot of people like him. He's also killed a lot of people and done some really horrible things, but for some reason nobody ever pays attention to that. Right now he's just the leader of the army, but he really wants to be the president for life. When he seizes control of the country, he's going to have all of his opponents in the government and army killed. Then he's going to establish a special government agency that sounds harmless, but will actually kill people, including judges, priests, leaders, scholars, and ordinary people. He's promised to hold free elections and establish a democracy, but he doesn't really intend to do it. He will also kick out most Asian and non-African people out of the country, even citizens whose grandparents first moved here, and send the rest to a special camp in the countryside. He thinks Hitler was a great leader, and he agrees with everything he did. He also supports terrorists and invades his own neighbors. In the 1970s, he achieved all of this, and over 300,000 people died during his rule. If you'd looked into it, I'm sure you would have known this. His name is Idi Amin. Thanks for voting for him. Did you vote for candidate C? This person probably needs no introduction, but let's try it anyway. He believes the German race is superior to all other races on the planet, and he wants to unify all the German people under one great empire. In order to create this empire, he's going to need a lot of room, so he intends to attack all the countries in Eastern Europe. First, he's going to act like he's going to quiet down and go away if people give him what he wants, but then when it's too late, he's going to attack anyway. People are scared and very easy to fool. Because he thinks other races are inferior, he intends to enslave them or kill them. He hates Jews the most and blames them for all the problems that his country has ever had. He intends to kill them all, but they aren't the only ones he's going to get rid of. He's going to eliminate anyone who opposes him or anyone who is different, including people from different political parties, religions, races, and the physically handicapped or mentally ill. He almost achieved his dream in the 1940s. He conquered most of Europe and had over 6 million Jews and other people murdered. In the war he started, over 60 million people died, and oh yeah, unlike those other dictators, he was actually elected. He even wrote a book saying exactly what he intended to do, but very few people cared enough to read or believe what he had promised to do in his book. His name is Adolf Hitler, and he thanks you again for voting for him. Did you vote for candidate D? Her mission in life is to help the poorest of the poor all over the world. When she was 12, she decided that she wanted to be a nun, and when she was 18, she joined an Irish missionary order and traveled to India to teach and care for the poor. She was so moved to help the poor there that eventually she started her own order and spent the rest of her life working for the poorest of the poor. She's established many hospice houses around the world and attracted many other people to support her cause. She thinks that helping and serving other people is the most important thing in the whole world, and she has received many awards for her work, including the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. She has also been called the most admired person of the 20th century, and despite being criticized by some people for her conservative religious views, she thinks that these views have given her the courage to do everything she has done. Her name is Mother Teresa. Hi there. Today we get to talk a little bit about voting. I hope you had fun with the initial part of this where you get to pick a candidate, but obviously voting and not knowing what we're voting for, it makes a big deal. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the history of voting and some of the pieces of it that you need to know about. Because actually one of the problems here in the United States is that we have one of the lowest turnouts initiative in almost all of the first world nations. Our registration rate actually is pretty high, but that process that you have to register ahead of time, that you have to turn in what you're going to vote, that you have to get all those pieces, that becomes an issue. So if you look at how many people actually vote here in the US, you have a turnout rate. We take the number of registered voters, subtract the number that are voting, and this is part of the problem. If you can't register, then even if we're only doing that, we're getting a small portion of the people. We're not measuring it out of all of the people who are participating. So in a presidential election, we're actually going to get quite a few. We get about a 60% turnout rate. Again, that's only of the people, though, who are participating, who've already registered. That doesn't count the ones who didn't or can't. In our midterm election, we get about 40%. And if it's a state or local election, so let's say the Yucaipa School Board, we tend to only get about 30% of the voter turnout. When you compare it to other countries, we have a significantly lower percentage of our population that actually votes. And part of the problem is that we don't have an automatic registration. The fact is that you have to go through a process. You have to turn in paperwork in order to vote. We also have more votes than almost any other nation. You're not just voting on one vote. So for example, you're voting for one member of parliament every 4 years in England. Here, we have a voting system that is designed for you to vote and then vote some more. So you're going to vote in a primary, and then you're going to vote in the main election. You have to vote for this or vote for that. And because we have a significantly higher percentage of votes available, we actually have a lower percentage of people participating in them in any given time. It's been declining since the 1900s, the percentage of people registering and the percentage of people voting, and they're looking at reasons why. So some people argue it's a decline in interest, but especially if you know as young people, that's probably not the case. So part of the other thing is that there's a weakening of the competition between the parties, that when you have a defining point, so slavery versus not slavery, federalism versus anti-federalism, you're going to have more people who want to have a say. If it seems like both parties are doing the exact same thing, which, hint, that should sound familiar, you're probably going to have less people voting. And that voter apathy thing, that's a real problem. If my vote doesn't count, comes up that often, and we know it does, then why bother voting? And so that issue about why we vote, how often we vote, and what percentage of voting, that's become a challenge here in the United States. MTV even came up with a Rock the Vote campaign to try to fight and get more people to vote. As it stands, the who votes question, what percentage of people tend to vote, is going to be applied by their income, their occupation, their education, number one factor, the region of the country, and then whatever religious or ethnic or age background they've got. So here's what winds up happening. You get more upper class people, more older people, more religious people, and those of you who've been doing your research for your term paper know that that means that oftentimes they have a higher percentage of our Republican voters actually voting than the people who are Democratic voters actually voting. And that's an issue. The Democrat Party has been working hard to try to fix that, try to make themselves accountable, but those demographics make it a challenge. One of the other things has to do with how we do the voting. So if you are a lower class or blue collar worker, you're going to wind up having a hard time getting time off to go vote on a Tuesday in the middle of the day versus someone who's got a professional job and maybe have an easier time. We can solve that with some of the things like the ballots that can be mailed in, but that a lot of the issues that we see with some of the income, occupation, education, a lot of those issues actually affect who, Republicans or Democrats, are going to be voted together. You're going to have a chance to watch some of the Rock the Vote information here. Rock the vote! Turn out for what? The Rock the Vote campaign is specifically designed to get young adults, the 18 to 21-year-olds, to vote. Turn out for what? Turn out for what? Be sure to watch the video to see all the famous celebrities that MTV uses for this product. All right, history of voting. This one's going to be a whole lot easier. I'm super excited, but you already know suffrage is another term for voting. We find it in two places. Article 1, Section 2, that describes how we're voting for our representatives. It does not describe voting for our senators. Remember, they were not initially voted on by the people. And then Article 2, Section 1 which is how a president gets elected, and actually defines the Electoral College, which is where we talked about in order to get rid of the Electoral College, you actually would have to do a constitutional amendment. The 10th Amendment obviously gives the powers not delegated to the U.S. by Constitution to the states. And so in general, most of our election process is governed by state law. So that's a really critical piece. One of the issues that's come up time and time again, whether you're talking poll taxes, whether you're talking motor voter laws, is whether or not a state has the right to do something. And the 10th Amendment's where they're getting part of the issue from. Okay? Amendment 15, Amendment 17, Amendment 19, Amendment 24, and Amendment 26. You don't have to memorize those, but just real quickly, 15 is going to give people the right to vote, not banned by the basis of color. 17 is going to give us the right to vote for our senators. 19 is going to give women the right to vote. 24 is going to get rid of poll taxes, and then 26 is going to be the lowering of the age to 18. And again, this is all based on the idea that in order for the federal government to have any say in election process, we had to have a constitutional amendment. So there's quite a few of them on there that we wouldn't see in other places. It's hard to see right here. We've got 1957. I'm going to try and move this just a little bit. We've got 1957, 1960, and then the big one, 1965. Those are all the Voting Rights Acts. There had to be several of them. There was such an issue with the Jim Crow laws in the South that the movie Selma, that 1965 Voting Rights Act, that is a direct result of John F. Kennedy's death, Martin Luther King Jr., the March on Selma, all those pieces. So real quickly, your history coming back to get you. All right. Obviously, the literacy tax issues, we didn't get to have some fun. I have a whole entire activity that we do where you have to do a poll tax and do your literacy test. But I'm going to point out this is not old. This is not gone, because we now currently have an issue over whether or not you have to show ID to be able to vote. There's a lot of people on both sides of this issue. The problem is there's no right way to do things. And I know I'm going to start off with probably a firefight, but just to be clear, the Supreme Court has, sorry, I'm going to go back one. Supreme Court has actually said you have to have more or less equal votes. So within a state, this is very critical, within a state, state of California, state of New York, state of Texas, within a state, all of your voting districts for your House of Representatives have to be approximately equal. So more or less the same amount of people within those districts. When we did gerrymandering, you looked at how we did that. You saw how the numbers went. But when you take a state like Wisconsin, they're automatically guaranteed one member in the House of Representatives. Well, that one member in the House of Representatives has more power, if you will, than the member representing the one area here in the state of California. There's more people in our district than there is in the entire state because of the way that the states automatically get a credit for a House of Representatives member. So it doesn't play in a voting for a president. It doesn't even play in for voting for a senator. It can have a play when it comes to our electoral college, because again, every state gets at least 3 votes in electoral college. But this right here, this issue about whether your rural votes count the same as city votes, that's a big ticket item, especially when we start getting the whole like, well, they got 50% of the vote, but they didn't win the presidency. That's going to be part of the issue. The other one that we talked a little bit about is this voter ID law, and this one right here is a little bit old. I believe this is from the 2003, 2004 issue, but it's still current day. There are still arguments happening, and you guys are probably seeing them on the news. Do we require some form of ID to vote? Right now, state of California, if I want to go vote, I simply walk into an election place, and if I have registered to vote ahead of time, then all I do is sign on the line and they let me vote. There is no proof whatsoever other than the fact that I registered. But registering to vote doesn't require proof of anything either. So it's one of those issues that has come up over and over again. One of the problems with requiring some sort of ID is that you don't have to prove anything to vote. It's supposed to simply be a universal right. And the concern over non-citizens, the concern over dead people who are on the roll sheets, that's a very small percentage of the problems that they have with voting. And so the ACLU and other groups like them that are trying to get rid of any sort of voter ID laws and take it to the Supreme Court and say that it's unconstitutional, the reason that they're arguing is that this is a hindrance to people, especially of lower income, maybe lower socioeconomic, maybe some other ethnic groups. They don't have the right to vote. There's also a push, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this either, but there's also a push to get felons who in general do not have the right to vote, but to get felons who've already served their time, get them back the right to vote. And when you start talking taxation without representation, the group of felons are the people who are actually on the line when it comes to what we do with our money, and yet they have no say in it, even though they are being held responsible, if you will. They get the piece of it. By the way, I would argue that for your students and your education as well, but that they're experiencing what our government is doing with voting without any of the rights and protection of it.